Hello, welcome to another episode of Full Circle with me, Onyx. And today I'm actually building a, a witch jar. And I will say I'm doing it the way I do it. So you may know some other ways, but I basically think most folk magic and I would say witchcraft in general, um, you use the things around you to symbolize your intention, and then you fuel it with things around you, preferably nature. In my mind, a witch is directly tied to the earth, has a relationship with the earth. So that is what I think witchcraft is. And so, craft, you can think of a skill set that you build over time. Uh, and so, in my mind, that turns into uh, folk art, folk magic, because you're gathering things that you found in your little town or province, and the accumulated knowledge you that was passed down to you through your neighbors, your grandparents, your family line, and kind of like home remedies and wisdom, almost like a scrapbook, a collection of how we survived as a people, um, in this land, in this valley, and what we did over the centuries, what worked. And so the wisdom of witchcraft could go into how to build a fire, how to sharpen your sword, how to mend clothes, how to make clothes. So hunt, gather. So it's not really far off and is superstitious, um, that this offshoot of witchcraft has become. You know, wear black, worship a pagan goddess. It really, got polarized, with evil and all those scary things, taboo things, paranormal, superstitious things, fear based stuff that got really scary. And I like to always remind people that our past isn't really a clear reflection. There was no TV, there was no radio, there was no real technology. So, what we have is a whole bunch of assumptions, storytelling, and myth and legend making. Um, and so I feel like the story of witchcraft, the history of witchcraft, reads more like a dark fairy tale and is really very far from the reality of it. Because it's become so polarized, it almost seems exclusive when really you could say it's universal to anyone and everyone. So I think the word witch has a really huge stigma put on it. When we think of the word witch, it can be very triggering for people. You might think of a scary old lady wearing black, pointing her finger, muttering things to you. um, we didn't understand uh, neurodivergence. We didn't understand illnesses plaguing the body and the mind, making people go crazy. We didn't understand a lot of those things. And so we would just assume possession, assume magical powers. Like we didn't really know a lot. So there's a lot of tribes who feel like witches are evil, and so you can't even mention the word or the practice of such things or anything that looks like that is very frightening for a lot of people of different cultures. So it just seems here in the West, it becomes very popular. As a women in power movement, it becomes popular to find your personal power under the archetype of the witch. So I don't really say I'm a witch. I don't really practice that as my So I don't really have a belief system. I don't have a faith. I don't use like ideas to guide my life. Um, so it has nothing to do with politics, has nothing to do with, for me, it has nothing to do with gender, has nothing to do with let's save the earth or goddess worship or I know there's life after death. Like I don't use religion as a way to justify things I have faith in, things I believe. I just play around with it. I just play around. And over the years, it, some things work, some things don't work. But it's a very, very creative process. And interesting, interestingly enough, when I'm doing my magic, uh, what happens to me is I'm transformed in the process, kind of like the alchemist. I might start the project, and then as I'm, for lack of better words, co creating, I'm learning as I go. And the whole thing can modify itself a few times before I end up with my product. So I only use things as a guideline, knowing my intuition is guiding the process, and also knowing that I'm learning like on a meta level, understanding the workings of magical working. So let's so I that was kind of a disclaimer, and hopefully it also liberates you to be creative. So today, I was driving with my friend. We were going to like the Crystal Rock shop and just hanging out on my day off. And I mentioned to her that I met one of my friends from the past. And then I was like, "Hi, how are you? Haven't seen you for a while." And she's like, "Yeah, I kind of got into a witch cult. And then it kind of turned like really scary and nasty. And I just got out of it. And I would love to catch up and have tea with you sometime. We can talk." Like, of course, I ran into you, my magical friend. And I was like, "Okay, sounds interesting." You know, and then last night, I was like, I would assume if you're in any type of group, there's gossip going on. Like you're connecting with people on different levels, whether it's as friends or if it got kind of hostile, then it could be enemies, there could be a grudge, there could be some unfinished business. And I was like, what is the responsible thing to do? I mean, look at the situation in the present moment. You met a friend. She confessed that she's had difficult times in a very scary cult. And I would somehow understand her. What would be the right thing to do? Magic, right? What kind of magic? Maybe some clearing, maybe some protection of unseen forces that she may not be aware of. That would be like being her big brother. That would be like a friend looking out for a friend. I'm like, how involved do I really want to get into this? I know. Let's make a witch jar. Simple, effective, just like a mojo bag, just like a magical box. They all seem to be the same. Throw in the ingredients that you think would work and, call it good. So I started having fun. I pulled out my bowl of lots of crystals and stones that had been tumbled, and I started thinking. I was like, if magic was going on behind her and she was unaware of it, what would I like to do? If it was negative and directed towards my friend, I would like to just grab it and ground it. Grab it and ground it. So, what stone in my mind would be doing that? Obsidian. So, I got some obsidian, put it in the jar. And then I was like, what else? Probably if you're under some negativity, your chakras need to be cleared so you can have your own personal connection to source. Some blue kyanite. What else? At least a quartz crystal, right? Let's think about your friend. Tune in. Yep. And so you got to link your magic to your target. Done. All in the jar. Put the lid on it. Call it good, right? Almost. This is all kind of like secret. I want to just secretly do my magic. So she doesn't have her subconscious getting in the way. I want to secretly do my magic so I don't have this coven of negative people, really probably just haters who just, drink coffee and donuts and talk about how cool they are and don't really do much, just hate on people, push negative energy. Like, I don't really want to get that involved, but, if I could, kind of be of assistance, let's see what happens. So I did that. And I was telling my friend about it, you know, just a little bit. I was like, oh, I experimented with a wish jar. And she's like, really? You should make me a jar. And I'm like, because this is my friend who is a witch and she loves to make witch jars. And she's made a few for me. Um, and she's like, I just bought a bunch of bottles on Temu, and I got like 100 little bottles for $13. And I was like, okay. She's like, will you make me a witch jar? And I'm like, sure. What do you want it for? She's like, maybe for some energy. I went, okay. And then we separated, and I was like, number one, I will do my magic in secret. If I'm going to perform the operation for someone, sometimes it's best if they don't know. So even though I said I would do it, I didn't say when, I didn't say how, I didn't say I was going to give her the jar or anything like that. So, and I was like, so what I like to do is I like to go to antique stores and actually get antique bottles if I'm going to do witch jars, magical jars. So these were like $2 each. So for $4, I got way better jars. These jars were probably made before I was ever born. They're going to live so much longer, so I feel like they have more substance to this reality. The shape of the jar is very important. So I kind of hold the jar and I feel, how the energy is working. Is it like a vacuum sucking in? How it, or does it feel like it's really able to hold something energetically? I get a psychic vibe about it. I'm like, oh, I need this one for me. And then, this just had a vibe to it. Like, I could handle it and work with it. I can connect with this glass as a substance. So, anyways, I ended up using one of my other jars that I already had in stock because it could fit the tumbled stones that I was going to put into it. But the process started very intuitive. I just had some crystals and stones. And like, as soon as she said, oh, I would like a spell, like a magical witch jar for energy. I'm like, I know exactly what I'm putting in that. I am going to put in some garnet. And I'm like, I think I have a garnet at home. I'm going to use a garnet. And I'm like, oh, but I really love this garnet. So maybe I won't do that one. Then I'm like, oh, what else? Intuitively, I was like, some natural citrine. I was like, yes. And I'm like, am I going to go use raw stones or am I going to use tumbled stones? I ended up using tumbled stones. And I used this jar because it fit them all in there. And I knew red tiger iron was going to be used. Um, and I had so as I'm gathering the stuff kind of intuitively, you know, I've had a long history playing with my crystals and rocks, about 20 years. So I would say I'm pretty intuitively advanced because that knowledge is already there. I've read, I've played, I've experimented. Um, and so it wasn't too hard to just go to my resources and get what I needed. And then I was like, what do I want to add? Any herbs, any spices? And I was thinking cinnamon. I was thinking like red pepper. And then I was like, you know what? We're going to use essential oils instead of raw herbs. Even though I'm notorious for making my own herbal tea blends. So, okay. And then I was like, I would really like to use some cotton, real cotton. So, for me personally, cotton is a very big deal. Um, Growing up, the guy in the in the I would say the bad part of town, the bad part of the city, the scary part, the where all the poverty is and the gangs. There was this one guy who grew cotton in a line um, in front of his house. And so this is like in the early 90s, okay? And I remember I was young and he was nice and friendly and I got out and I was talking to him and I was like, what is this? Like, is this real cotton? He's like, yeah. I'm like, why are you growing it? And he's like, to remember my ancestors. So he was, a man of color. And all my friends are of color. And so for me, and I grew up on a farm. So I lived in the farm right next to the city. And it goes into the bad part of the town before it gets to the good part of town. So a lot of times I had to walk, depending upon what I was doing, or I was driving in and out of town all the time. So I would pass his house all the time, you know? Um, and so for me, and then eventually he passed away, and the house was demolished and everything. It was gone. And so there was no more roots and no more heritage. And so my sister, all her kids are of color. And so I love my cotton. I love being a farmer. Coming from a farmer's adopted into a farming background. So the connection to the earth is really strong. So for me, cotton is very sacred. So I love that this is full of cotton seeds. And I was like, am I going to use actual cotton in my friend's experimental witch jar? The answer was heck no. But so the first phase of my process, it was all intuitive, gathering real resources, real cotton, real crystals, real unpolished raw, having the real deal with real glass. I'm working with raw, living materials. The energy on them is stronger. The energy is not cheapened. You know, it takes time. So what does she got is the stuff you'd buy in the grocery store. I save all the cotton. When you get like vitamins and it has little cotton packing in there, I save it, and use it for other purposes. So I'm like, I will use cotton in this spell, in this magical witch jar, and I will put the essential oils on it, the ones that I want. So phase one was all raw and real. Phase two was, so that was like a sketch, the artist's big idea. And the second part was choosing tumbled stones that aren't going to chip and break, that I'm not going to have to worry about oils and spices damaging them. So I gave her the second. So this is a piece of tumbled garnet. And then I was going to do some fire agate, which is known to help people with energy. So while I was selecting my stuff, I wasn't like watching TV and listening to music and doing, and it wasn't even like sacred space, altar, calling in the four quarters or anything like that. It was just like, let me tune into my friend. I knew Tiger's Iron was going to do the job. I knew the hematite in it was going to ground her. I already know she's in Aries, cusp Pisces. So, and she has Cancer Moon. I know she needs grounding. I know she needs earth. And I was like, Jasper would be really nice. A hematite would be pretty nice. Let's just do the best of both worlds and put in red Tiger's Iron. So I picked that. And then I was like, I'm strongly feeling. So, like, what was interesting is like while I'm thinking about her and holding this down, kind of selecting, it was like the space above my head, like the crown, was feeling certain pressure. You know, this energy was coming in. Like I'm working with a higher power. The light is turned on, the crown is working. And I'm like, well, this is different than a lot of other. So I'm like, I'm in the moment, I'm in the flow, I'm connecting to my client or my whoever I'm doing the jar for. I'm selecting intuitively. I'm like, this is kind of like art. I'm like feeling it. So I'd pick a stone and I would go like, is this right for my client? And when the energy got stronger, you know, my head was like pounding. I'm like, yes. And so I selected the ones. I tried to keep it simple, like a rule of three. 3 stones and a crystal or something like that, or just 2 stones and a crystal. And we got 4 stones and a crystal. And so I was like, the next step, you know, I'm just there. It's all together. I mean, obviously, if you had something from the person, I usually throw away gifts and I usually throw away things people give me because I like to just be so connected without any interference. It's just me and source. Uh, so I usually, or if someone has shown me a little immaturity, I see that as a red flag of a future breakup. So I usually just don't keep things people give me for my own. So I was like, if I wanted to, I could have just like linked it with something she gave me and threw that in there to create the link. But we're already pretty good friends, so I can just feel in and think about it. Or another creative word, dial in, you know, align. So I'm aligned. Another thing that was happening, like when I started the working, it just felt like a spiraling cone of energy coming down and right into the jar. So I was like, perfect. So I really do. I handle the glass, you know, and I'm working on a whole other level. I'm like, okay, the energy's coming in, the intention is going in. I'm selecting the objects. Whether they have power or not, it doesn't matter. They symbolically represent very clear little intentions. So I'm like, let's actually. I knew I wanted wood. I knew cedar is very strong. So I have my piece of cedar. You know, I even have pine resin. I'm like, maybe I'll use my pine resin. So once again, I'm just showing you I'm drying my own, making my own resin that I've collected a couple of years ago. I'm letting it naturally dry over the years so then I can burn it. So I'm thinking, you know, I'm not, I'm close as I can to the earth, close as I can with the materials I'm working with. And then I select the oil. This one's rosewood. I was like, we're going to go with rosewood. And then we're going to use the cotton. Yep. Perfect. So many ways to get creative. You know, on my other jar, I actually put sage oil on the outside, and rubbed it and did the anointing like I would a candle. But on this one, I know I just need the essence in there. And we just put it in there. I was actually thinking of putting it around the inside of the jar to create like a magic seal. So we'll do that. I'll like to line the lid with the essential oil. Perfect. Oops. I guess we're going to do the outside too. So the jar can smell good and look good. There. You can seal the jar if you want. Sometimes my jars I leave open depending upon what it's doing. Like if it's gathering and collecting negativity, I don't need a lid on it. I need it open to gather and gather until it's all in there. Then seal it. If it's a special energy that I'm connecting with someone and I don't want interference, well, then I might seal it. I might twist the lid 3 times, like in a special gesture. My friend, she likes to do the wax sealing on them. So the ribbon with the wax and then her personal seal on it. I like to just sometimes do a thread ribbon. I'll wrap it around like 3 times. So I'm always using the number 3 and then I just tie it. And it's sealed. So kind of like the aftermath is simple. I was thinking she wanted energy, Mars. And then intuitively I was thinking usually if you need energy, your energy's blocked. So maybe her second chakra is clogged. Maybe her root chakra is clogged. Maybe her aura is full of garbage that needs to just be released. So I was thinking release. So I used the planet Pluto, the Scorpion energy of release. And then I was thinking energy has a lot to do with motivation and follow through. So even though she was saying energy, it's to do the things that she would like to do. So I'm like, that sounds like courage and self-esteem, because you could have all the energy in the world, but if you're pushing on the brakes with self-doubt, you're going to drain yourself and get depressed. Depression is repressed energy. So, and then the other thing I was thinking, boundaries. Having a Cancer moon, you probably have boundary issues and you're absorbing other people's energy, being a super empath. And when people are thinking negative things about your hopes, wishes, and dreams, that can really slow down your energy, make you feel negative and heavy. If you're always considering other people's opinions over your own, putting yourself last, being a people pleaser, that can really block your energy. So I put Saturn for boundaries, and the boundaries would be the protection. So kind of knowing her life story, kind of mentoring her for months, I can put other things together, because I have a different perspective. So understanding all that, um, I put this on the altar. And then I chose to modernize my art. I have this like shock absorber or spring that comes from a car. That's like the cosmic spiral moving through the planes and dimensions. So I put my jar on top, stick my sigil on the bottom, lay it on the altar, and then if I'm doing something secret that I don't want people interfering with, I cover it like in a black bag, representing the void and the mystery and things you cannot see. So I'll just put the whole thing in a black bag and then stick it on the spring and set it. I'm going to set it in my room so it won't be disturbed. And then I'm just going to be patient and let the magic work itself out. So I'm not going to look for sudden changes. We're just going to see how it goes. Because the last spell I did with just a simple crystal, I set the intention. I was like, you know what? I really like a certain someone. Let's just dissolve the boundaries that needed to be dissolved. I wasn't thinking so much of outcomes because that polarizes things and then sets up expectation and pressure. I was thinking, let's just dissolve the block between us. Then, if he wants to talk to me, he can talk to me. If he doesn't have to. So I just held my crystal with the intention till it warmed up, and then I put it in a black bag and stuck it in my drawer. About a week later, he then calls me. So I'm like, that works. So we're always looking for sudden magical changes. I'm like, let's just let the magic work itself out in its own time. Let's trust the magical process we were in and let it go. When you let it go, it can manifest for you. Some things do take more time to work themselves out through the dimensions, through the planes before it materializes. So I'm just going to set that probably like in my closet. I'll put the sigil down first and then I'll set it and forget it. The whole process really didn't involve other people in this spell work, and it was general enough. It was focused. I was clear with my intention. I symbolized my intention with stones and whatever. Now all I have to do is let go.